Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to part 2 of Mastering Narrative Writing. We are going to talk about narrative writing structure in this video. Just to recall, what is narrative writing? The definition 1 is about the writing tips. Narrative writing is to tell a story. It can include actual events told in chronological order, or it may include imagined events told in a timeline that the author creates. Narrative writing can sustain the reader's attention and help them visualize a realistic experience from the words. The second definition is about the structure, and we are going to dilate this in a while in this video. A narrative essay is a typical five paragraph essay which has one introduction, three main body, and one conclusion paragraph. If needed, you can change the number of body paragraphs according to the topic. To introduce the structure, I'm going to show you the story arc. The story arc is actually a key to the writing five paragraphs within the narrative essay. The first paragraph is the exposition. Second is the rising action. Third is the climax. Fourth is the falling action. And fifth is the resolution. I'm going to talk about all these elements of structure in terms of the story and encounter with the frog, which we discussed in our previous video as well. Now, coming to the very first element, exposition. Well, exposition is in the context of narrative or storytelling refers to the introduction of background information that helps the audience understand the story's context, characters, setting, or prior events. It means that in exposition, you must introduce your main character, but don't forget to use proper noun for your character. Give the setting, because with the change of the setting the entire scenario or the reaction of the character will change. Talk about in a line or so about the prior events. For example, if you're talking about an encounter with a frog, then you can tell why you were home alone. Probably their parents left for another city in a hurry or something of the like. It is a crucial element for setting the stage and providing necessary details before the main action happens. So, in other words, the exposition should include who is the protagonist, what does the protagonist want in normal life, the key relationships and roles, a sense of the happening around. In other words, you need to give the reader one small hook, but don't forget that exposition must have conflict in it. Here, the conflict is introduced. In other words, an inciting incident that happens and disrupts the protagonist's normal world. What does it include? It includes a problem, a challenge, an opportunity that forces change, a question or decision that the character cannot ignore. While writing, writers should aim to avoid overly descriptive or bulky paragraphs that might disrupt the reader's engagement. And this is a very important point regarding exposition. Now, let's discuss it in terms of an encounter with the frog. Exposition over here represents calm evening. The setting is obviously the sitting room, and the atmosphere and the tone is of a calm evening. You are lying on the couch, sipping tea. Everything is peaceful around it. TV hums softly in the background. What is the emotional tone? Remember, I told you in my previous video that emotions are at the heart of the narrative essay. So the emotional tone must be established either through the setting or through the dialogues or through the character's body language. Whatever you want to describe, you must describe the emotional tone, which is of comfort and safety. But remember, the conflict is to be introduced over here. So an inciting incident happens, or the conflict happens as the frog appears within the living room. Out of the corner of your eye, you spot movement, a frog snack in the middle of the carpet. This moment should raise the stakes and make the reader feel things cannot go back to the way they were. In other words, it introduces the problem or the challenge or an opportunity that force change and a question or a decision that the character cannot ignore. Over here, the question is the frog is in the living room and should he get rid of it or not? And obviously, again, it will carry an emotional tone. The tone will shift twice in the opening paragraph or the exposition. because it will be surprise or a mild alarm over here. The next element, or element number two, is the rising action. Rising action is the part of the story that develops the plot and increases attention, leading towards the climax. It is the development of conflict which has already been introduced, and here the main character faces obstacle and conflicts, building suspense. Why did I write conflicts instead of a singular conflict? Well, the basic conflict has already been established, that is the presence of the frog. Now the minor conflicts which happen within the mind of the character will be introduced over here, which will show the setback. Enemies or personal doubts will arise. Revelations that deepen the main conflict will come into play. Every new event should increase risk, urgency, or emotional investment over here. Now coming to an encounter with a frog, rising action over here, the dance of avoidance will start. You will try to shoo it towards the door, it leaps towards you instead. This is the minor conflict which is highlighting the major conflict. The major conflict is an encounter with the frog. So what is happening? It is leaping towards you now, and this is something which is alarming. The frog disappears under the sofa. You consider broom, box, frog whispering, etc. The rising action will definitely carry the emotional appeal or the emotional tone, and that will be of confusion plus escalating urgency. Remember, I'm repeating that emotion is at the heart of the narrative writing. You must develop the emotional value, whether you do it through the dialogues, through the setting, or through the description of the character. But dialogues are a must. Next comes the climax. This is the third paragraph, by the way. First paragraph was the exposition, second was the rising action, third is the climax. Climax is the turning point of the story. The climax of a story is a point in the narration where the tension, excitement, or stakes reach the highest levels. The purpose is definitely it's a most intense, high stake moment where the main conflict peaks. The conflict, emotional conflict, is already there. Now you have to show the height of the conflict over here. It is often the conclusion of a story's main conflict and sets up for either successful resolution or an unsatisfied ending. It depends upon your plot, that where you want to take the story further. A decisive confrontation or choice will be introduced in the climax. The writer, the protagonist has to choose, has to make a decision. It is the moment of greatest emotional or moral weight. The outcome should feel inevitable in the hindsight but surprising in the moment. I will explain it through an encounter with the frog. If you look at it, the climax is a standoff part of the entire story over here. The frog emerges, poised like it is challenging you for the territory. You make a decisive move, the final move. Scoop it. You have made a decision over here, a decision which carries a great emotional value and moral weight. It is a decisive confrontation or choice. You scoop it up with a mixing bowl and a piece of cardboard. Obviously, the emotion is over there. Emotional tone is heart racing, high stakes in your mind. Now comes the fourth paragraph, which is the falling action. The falling action is a part of the story that follows the climax. The purpose of falling action is to show the immediate effect of the climax. Obviously, the effect can be either physical or emotional. It is basically how the character reacts or recovers from that height of emotions. It is where the tension begins to decrease and the story moves towards its resolution. Key aspects of falling action include resolving conflicts, tying up loose ends, and providing a sense of closure for both characters and the reader. It should reveal any last twists in the story. This is where lingering questions are answered, but momentum should still carry forward. Let's discuss it in terms of encounter with the frog. Falling action means a release. You have overcome your fear. You are finally ready. You have already captured the monster, the frog. You carry it outside, open the door of your improvised frog transporter. It hops away without so much as a thank you. Emotional tone over here is relief plus slight indignation. So we will move to the final fifth paragraph, which is the resolution or the culmination of the narrative essay. A resolution in the plot occurs when the conflict finally resolved and loose and have been tied up. The purpose over here is to establish how the protagonist's world has change. What to include over here? A sense of closure for the reader, whether character's goal was achieved or transformed. Even if it is an open ending, show how the journey has changed the protagonist, so the change must be there. Now let's look at it in terms of an encounter with the frog. Resolution is the new normal. Obviously, his feelings have changed. He is a changed person. The character, you, if you are the one who you are narrating the story, so you are a changed person now. You were afraid in the beginning, but you return to your living room, scanning corners just in case. You sip your tea again. You are calm, feeling oddly victorious. So you have changed from your emotions have changed from fear to being victorious. Emotional tone, calm returns, but now with frog related vigilance. So you have to show the change in the character over here. Finally, the summary of narrative structure. The summary of narrative structure is your essay has to be based upon 5 paragraphs. Exposition, which should talk about the setting, the introduction of character, the introduction of conflict. The rising action is where the conflict is by the way aided with smaller conflicts in order to give rise to the climax is the height of emotions. The conflict is at its peak, the emotions are at the peak, and then you have to make the character has to make a decision. After making that decision, falling action starts, which finally culminates into resolution. This is how you will make the 5 paragraphs of your narrative essay. Your essay has to be based upon 5 paragraphs, and this is the structure of narrative essay. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and thank you for being with me.